What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Coast to Coast. I'm Ronan Gaine. Joining me as always, Chris Nambu. Thank you so much for making this your first podcast for NBA coverage. Remember, you're on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe, leave a comment, let us know what you think. You're on Apple Podcasts, you're on Spotify. Make sure you leave that 5-star review. You do that, we'll keep producing that content. On today's episode, we of course are going to get into the Chicago Bulls, Chris's team. We finally have a reason to actually discuss them, and it's actually positive as well. It's kind of crazy. We'll also be getting into the Memphis Grizzlies, their decision to fire Taylor Jenkins, and where do they go from here? But before we get into it, it's been a hot minute, man. Chris, how you doing?
It's been good, and no pun intended. It is a hot minute. I'm down here in Georgia recording on my iPad, so luckily finding be on. Work has been crazy, so glad you can fit me in. Glad we can talk about basketball. And I know this is probably the first time we talk about the Bulls, and I'm still deciding whether or not it's good, it's bad. It is exciting, but I'm happy to get into it. But my second favorite team, the Memphis Grizzlies, I've been following them really closely ever since Ja was drafted. I loved the grit and grind Memphis Grizzlies, big Marcus Gasol guy, big Mike Conley guy. And I'm just they've always been my second team. And to see what's happened this last week, and to see generally the vibe around this team last month, man, let's talk about it. I did not see this coming. I don't think anyone saw this coming. It's in a few days, and there's still not a lot of light into why Taylor Jenkins is no longer the coach of the Memphis Grizzlies. And I'll start with this. 4 days before he was fired, he was fourth in odds for coach of the year. He was fourth to win coach of the year with 9 games left. A team that probably was going to finish at least in the top four in the West with 9 games left. Where do we start, Ronan? I don't know. I don't fully understand yet what happened. There's so many rumors to sift through. There's so many theories to sift through. Obviously, this isn't the first crack we've seen when the relationship between Taylor Jenkins and this organization and their stars. But how are you feeling with this one?
Obviously, first when I first heard the news and I get the notification on my phone from Shams, and I'm just like, what the fuck? Like I was stunned. I was floored by it. I think of Taylor Jenkins being one of the brightest coaching minds in the entire NBA, and what this team have been doing for such a large part of the season. Like you almost kind of forget about the Grizzlies because they're so like steady, they're so like strong. You almost kind of you're able to just like not watch them too closely, and they always kind of felt like they were still in and around it in the West, and they obviously they were in the second seed at one point. They've obviously dropped down now, but then you have to take in a bit more context. You kind of hear different little bits of reporting, and you hear little things like how they've only beaten four teams who have a winning record since the turn of the year. That's obviously not
Yeah.
that's not great.
Yeah.
That's pretty disappointing. That's why they've fallen off. But then again, there's still a team that are going to almost definitely be in the playoffs. There's still a team that have been battling injuries that are relying on rookies that have their best player putting up some of his worst performances of the year, and we're going to put that down to the Taylor Jenkins. That's the part that just feels crazy.
Yeah. And I mean, a couple things there. One, name another team that has had the same number of lineup changes and inexperienced guys that insert into their rotation that can tell you they're the top four in their conference.
Mhm.
None. Zero. And the fact that this team has been able to, bring up young guys, and again, I'll not just this isn't just a Taylor Jenkins thing. I think organizationally as a whole, they've that's why I've really loved the Grizzlies, the way that they've been able to find guys and get them into the rotation, and they work. They find the right guys and they know how to make them better, and we've seen that. And I think that that challenge in and of itself is probably the hardest challenge in the NBA because every single conversation we have about every single team when it comes to playoffs, when it comes to success, when it comes to building, is all predicated on health. And this team is probably the most successful team at adapting to that and has been over the last few years. I mean, last year was just such a catastrophe. Like that bent any team possibly beyond any imagination of possibly getting through a season with the amount of injuries that they had. But even this season, they've missed time from Ja, they've missed time from Bane, and I think that it's a testament to, I think that not just the adaptability to different lineups, that we saw with Jenkins and how he led this team, but just the overall spirit too. And maybe I'm getting more into a moratorium of his coaching time there, but you really felt like his competitiveness was injected into this roster. When they picked guys, they got guys in the room that were like that, but he really embodied that spirit. And you always felt that in close games at their end. He's always really fired up. He's always inspiring his guys. But those relationships don't always last when things aren't going well. But I still, relative to everything that's going on in the league, like you got to look around and be like, well, I think there's a lot of other strained relationships besides this one where they're heading into the playoffs with a top four record in the West. So I can't imagine where it started from, but let's start with the first rumor. Is it Ja? Do we believe it's because of Ja? That's always the first. It's always the lowest hanging fruit is to look at the star and be like, hey, he would have signed off on that, right? That's their guy. They wouldn't fire a guy that he really wants there at the minimum. I guess there's some truth to that. But I mean, what have you read? I've read numerous, inklings, numerous thoughts, numerous theories, but nothing bona fide that's really made me feel like, oh yeah, maybe that's what it was. I don't know.
Well, yeah, obviously the rumor comes out that Ja Morant was a bit displeased. Then it doesn't help when he comes straight back into the starting lineup straight after the day after Jenkins gets fired. That side of it doesn't really help. But it seems like there's been a growing trend that Ja's been unhappy this whole season. But that's not so much directed in terms of Jenkins. And this is something that I didn't realize. Like last summer, the Grizzlies were kind of pretty fed up, I guess, with Jenkins. And that's why they got this guy in from Paris basketball. They got in Noah LaRoche. And also, I don't know how to pronounce the name fully right, but he's a Finnish coaching Tuomas Lasala, who's now the interim. Those are the two guys that were like the driving force this year behind the offensive change.
Yeah,
They're the two guys like they were kind of battling over who's going to be in charge, who's going to like nail down how they're going to play basketball, really. And then all of a sudden, it's that element of like, oh, there's too many voices. There's three voices in the room
mm,
instead
yeah,
of the usual one that you want to have. And it seemed like that was something that was annoying Ja. Ja's obviously having one of the worst years of his career, the worst of since he's kind of broken out. This is like the worst season that he's had. Points down, uh, field goal percentage, 3 point percentage, basically any stat that you know of Ja Morant, it's all down. It's been a bad year. He's also still missed a lot of time. He's only played, I think, 43 games. So I mean, it would make sense that the Grizzlies kind of they tried to figure something out without getting rid of Jenkins last year, and even though they kind of felt like they wanted to, and then this year was kind of like I think they weren't really expecting to go beyond the first round, and they were going to fire him anyway. That's kind of what the
yeah.
vibe seems to be coming out. They were kind of expecting to lose in the first round and then fire him, but I really think it comes down to the fact that I think Jenkins has just got screwed because obviously they had he's been there since Ja's rookie year. That was like that. His first year was Ja's rookie year. Obviously, didn't do much of that year. They went for 34 games, finished ninth. Next year, they went 38 games. They get into the playoffs. They get the gentleman's sweep from the Jazz first round. And the year after that, they really break out. They win 56 games. They're the second seed. They're going up against the Warriors in the second round of the playoffs. Ja Morant is absolutely balling out. He's gone for 34, 47, and 34 again. Then he gets injured with the Grizzlies down 2-1. They ultimately lose that series to the eventual NBA champion Warriors. So I don't know how you can get too mad at that. Then the following year is the really disappointing year when they go down to the Lakers in the first round. And then that they have to stew in that going into that. The year after that is the year that they have so many injuries. Jazz got his off court issues and then comes back and gets injured straight away. They basically have nothing going for them other than Jaren Jackson Jr., who's the only guy who's really out in the floor for them. So in the mind of like the ownership and the people making the decisions, they're just stewing on that lack of playoff success after obviously Ja going down in 2022. Then the following year they had that disappointing year, and then they can't bounce back the year after that because the team is just completely depleted by injuries, and they can almost not even see that, and they're too focused on the bad feeling of the struggles that they had and the disappointing playoff loss. And I think that leaving them to stew on that, and then ultimately what's gone on this year, and I guess Jazz unhappiness has come to the front a bit of that. But I think it's really that fact that they didn't get an honest chance to bounce back after that playoff disappointment. And I think that's something that's really played a big role in why Jenkins has been dismissed.
Yeah, but it's crazy. Like
It's not his fault, not his
we're
fault at
saying they
all.
didn't
But
get
I
a
think
chance to
that
bounce
feels
back,
like what
but
happened.
yeah, I know. But the fact that we're even in this position where they're a top four seed, that they're going to
Yeah.
be a top four seed, and they weren't in the playoffs last year, and this is the most competitive the West has been in a while.
Hmm.
It that part of it too is just insane to me. And there's clearly more things that have gone on, and when management came to the podium and talked, they revealed nothing. Like they just did not want to discuss anything. And there's a whole bunch of professional like jujitsu of not explaining why they fired him, but saying for sure it was a managerial decision, not a player's decision. They're like, no players consulted us, fine. But the fact that they gutted the coaching staff last year,
Hmm.
that's a weird one. That happens very infrequently, especially to your coach who is the franchise record setter for wins in his young tenure there. So that that speaks to me more on like on the manager side. Do they feel like they wanted to go a different direction? Is this a stylistic thing? They wanted to see what they could do with this new style of offense, which I think definitively the cause of Jaws. Jaws still trying to find his way back in the league. Teams know how they want to play him. They're going to play off of him, and he can't really get downhill the way he used to at volume because they don't run pick and roll as much anymore. They don't have that sort of setup anymore. But what do we see? We see Edie in the starting lineup. We saw John in the starting lineup. Getting back into it, I should say. But we'll see how much Isalo is going to change the offense and maybe make pick and roll a little bit more of the focal point. And the possible good thing here that maybe shifting away too much on lamenting the loss of Jenkins, who I really think is just a tremendous coach. And I guess the last thing I'll say on it is just look across this roster, guys. Like how many great players have gone through this program that in large part was led by Jenkins ever since Ja's rookie year. This wasn't just Ja's team that they drafted Ja and everything went great. They set up a program here under the leadership of Jenkins that developed a culture that is one of the toughest teams in the NBA and produces some of the best role players, greatest teams that we've seen over the last 5 years, save health. So farewell to Jenkins. But moving on to the playoffs, I think there's reason to be hopeful. They've found a way to play differently than just jaw pick and roll, get jaw downhill and kick out. They found ways to get other guys involved. You've got your Santi Aldamas who are getting more aggressive off the dribble. We have Jaren Jackson Jr. being more of an initiator, and we have the movement offense that they've worked through all season. While it hasn't been the best for John Morant, what do we want to do in the playoffs? Like you can't just rely on John Morant in the playoffs, but you need to have different ways to attack, and they've been experimenting with that all season. So while maybe it wasn't the best for Ja, maybe this gives them a chance to be a little bit more of a threat in the playoffs than they would have been if they just had been a kind of one-trick pony on offense.
Yeah, I mean that. I guess that had to be the ultimate hope. I mean, that's why you kind of make these switches. I mean, you can make the argument that kind of they almost did it as a way to kind of undermine Jenkins in a way. Because maybe if they fired him last year, some of the players might have been upset. Maybe they kind of brought in this sort of situation just to make them kind of fall out of love with Jenkins a little bit. That's obviously going super deep and crypto on that one, but still. But yeah, and the other reason things with Ja, like I think he's talked about not wanting to dunk as much, not wanting to play as fast and as high octane as he had in his career because he's getting injured so much and he's getting hit. And I think that's another element of why he struggled this year. I think he's still trying to figure out what type of player he can be without being that high octane, the uber athletic guard. And yeah, he hasn't figured that out yet. And like maybe like that's taken away a bit. That's taken away a bit of his shine, not being able to have that, as well as like the different way they've tried to play. They've tried to play offense this year. And now, like you look now and you think like Jaren Jackson Jr. is kind of the vocal point. That's the way it's kind of switched. Like we like look at the last like 2 years. This has almost become Jaren Jackson Jr.'s team, and Bane is still doing good things. Obviously, his numbers are a little bit down as well. It's just I think they're just in a bit of a transition period. But I feel
Yeah,
like if they play this right, they can come out still on the right side of it.
yeah. I think there's a lot of reasons to be still hopeful, and it ultimately will still be such a weird time to transition, and it is a weird month for them. I mean, you brought up the record since February, or since January, but for the whole year, only 11-20 against teams above 500, and despite having the fourth best net rating in the league, their defense and offense in March have been below average, and their net rating in the month of March lower than the tanking Toronto Raptors. So for all the awesome things you talked about, sometimes there's a panic button, and everyone has an opinion on when it should be pressed. And time will only tell if they pressed it at the right moment. And maybe it's a wake up call. It's like, hey, we're the Memphis Grizzlies, and you guys should be better than this. And hey, we just fired your coach. Go do better. Like you guys have the personnel. Be better. And maybe again, that's another excuse for the fact that they wanted to move on from Jenkins. Maybe they had some tough meetings. Who knows? Maybe that relationship had just eroded, because ultimately the NBA is all about relationships. And just because someone's good doesn't mean that their boss likes them. Doesn't mean the players like them. And maybe that's kind of what had gone on. And that's something that no one's going to stand on a podium and be like, hey, this is what happened. You just kind of have to think about the reasonable approaches. Like I think there's not enough evidence for us to be like, yeah, that was Ja's fault. Like Ja's a pretty outspoken guy. And I feel like Ja, Bane, all of them, when they want to say something, they kind of are indirect about it, and they'll kind of say it. And it feels like that would be a pretty sad way for it to go, because they've always really had each other's back over the years. But
I am ready to say that they also may have done the San Antonio Spurs a massive favor, because if Popovich doesn't want to come back,
yeah,
Taylor Jenkins, come on
yeah,
down. That that
yeah.
that's, that seems like a pretty easy move to make, and let's see Taylor Jenkins go on a. I could see him doing some JB Bickerstaff sort of things like JB's doing over there in Detroit this year.
Listen, man, coaching, going from coaching Ja and Jaren Jackson Jr., Bane, and all them, to them being like, dang, I guess I got to go coach Wemby and De'Aaron Fox, Stephon Castle, all these young guys. That would be kind of a match made in heaven. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I think the pastures are going to be green for Jenkins, who I think is a fantastic coach, is a fantastic culture setter, and a guy that guys will go to war for. And you need coaches like that, especially if you're going to get competitive. But to end on a bright note, we look at best lineups as the rotation shrink at the end of the year, and teams are figuring out who their best guys are and who's going to be out there in their starting lineups. We look at the two best net ratings in the league, over 150 minutes played. Can you name them? And it's pretty obvious based on who we're talking about today. So I guess that's a layup for you. Here's your fast break layup.
Yeah, are they both the Grizzlies?
It's the Grizzlies, and the team we're going to talk about in a second, the Clippers. The
Okay.
Grizzlies, in 193 minutes with Ja Morant, Desmond Bain, Jalen Wells, Zach Edey, Jaren Jackson Jr., an offensive rating of 126.8, a defensive rating of 102.1 for the league best net rating, 24.7. That's pretty darn good.
Yeah.
And kudos, shout out to Jalen Wells, by the way, super underrated rookie who should get, some level of discussion for Rookie of the Year in a year, honestly, where it's so many to win. No one's really stood out for the entire season to say it's mine. But Jalen Wells is a guy who's a starter on a playoff team that's going to compete for the top of the West. Not a lot of guys can say that. Second, in 16 games played, 184 minutes, we have James Harden, Kawhi Leonard, Norman Powell, Ivica Zubats, and Jones Jr. for a net rating of 23.6, number 2 in the league. Now, I think it's time to talk about the Clippers. I think you talked about them last week. I missed out on that. So my apologies to those who are maybe hearing this again. But I have to admit that you brought up, well, you're still wrong, to be fair. To be fair to myself, you brought up the Clippers. There's still going to be hope, because what if James Harden becomes MVP level? And I just totally wrote the Clippers. I was like, all right, Kawhi's going to get hurt, whatever. James Harden's not really going to step up. But I have to be humble and say that I didn't expect to be sitting here. And it's like every single week since Kawhi's been back, it's like, okay, okay, okay. And he's still doing it. Every week since he's been back, it's like, all right, well, is Norman Powell going to go away? Okay, I guess not. I guess not. Is James Harden going to randomly get hurt? Okay, I guess not. Is he going to start becoming a chucker? I guess not. And things have just kind of stayed so steady for them throughout the whole season. Norman Powell being a top 20 scorer. Talk about scoring. I mean, he's scoring at a more efficient rate and at a higher volume than guys like Jaylen Brown, guys like Jamal Murray, guys like Jalen Williams. Want to talk about secondary scorers? He's their leading scorer. There's no other team in the league that has 3 20-point per game scorers. You want to look across history, it does not happen quite often. And I don't think we're talking about it. It's just like, oh, Kawhi's back. That's cool. You got 30-point bomb. It's like, no, he's not just back. This team is still a hell of a problem to deal with. They're top 5 defense, led by Tyronn Lue. They have scary long athletes. They can switch. Ivica Zubac is a very good drop defender. No one gives him respect for that, but he is. And then, Ben Simmons, like, there's so many places to start with this Clippers team that it's like, well, don't give me the hands. Like, he's like, what?
Do not talk to me about Ben Simmons. Talk to me about anyone else. Do not talk to me about Ben Simmons, bro.
Run the tape. But to open on the Clippers to say that I was wrong, maybe not for the wrong reasons, but I think there was reason to have hope. And I think you're looking at a very scary team in the West that is only starting to come into form, and I think is going to be one of the hardest outs in the playoffs this year.
Yeah, I think the reason that they're not really being talked about as much as you guess we would like, or maybe they should be, I think is because when they were basically like, I felt like for like the whole season, it kind of felt like they were like the 4 or 5 seed in the West up until around like kind of the mid to late January period. Then they had their slump, and I think they dropped down. Maybe they were as low as ninth. And I think everyone just kind of went like, "Oh,
Oh,
okay,
here we go again.
yeah,
Yeah.
it happened. We knew we knew they were always going to drop. That's what happened." And I don't think anyone's kind of paid attention to them enough since they've kind of made the bounce back, and obviously they haven't been able to get right back into the playoffs. I think they are currently the 6th seed. Maybe the Grizzlies or maybe the Warriors might have that at the moment, but it's basically tied or within a game of each other between the Warriors, the Clippers, and the Timberwolves. I think that's kind of reason maybe they're not being talked about enough. I think everyone's kind of just accepted that that's when they had their drop off and haven't really acknowledged that they've kind of had their glow up and their bounce back. But yeah, I mean, they've been good, and like, yeah, it's just in certain times of the year where it's just been hard out there, and he's been chucking like hell. Like, don't get me wrong, like his efficiency numbers there aren't great, but he's scored big when he's had to, and his like playmaking has been right up there as a place setter for this team. One of the best in the league, still without a doubt. Like Zubac, I think has been so impressive. Powell, obviously before going down. He hasn't like completely got back to it since he had that injury since his return, but the numbers he was putting up and the numbers that he's still putting up have been immense. But like again, we all know Ty Lue. We've always talked about Ty Lue is an unbelievable coach. It's not surprising that they're having this success. It's just going to come down to Kawhi Leonard. Is Kawhi Leonard healthy in the playoffs?
Yeah. Kawhi, if
That's
Kawhi
it.
Leonard's healthy in the playoffs, and let's put it this way: you talk about standings, it's so impossible to keep up with it. Like every day, like everything changes every day. They're the 8th
Hmm.
seed right now, so like,
Yeah.
and that's going to change tomorrow. Like
Yeah.
Timberwolves are a nice little run, Warriors nice little bounce back, Grizzlies at 5, but they're a game behind, 7 and 6, unknown tiebreaker there. To be fair, but what I'm saying, they're 2 games behind 5th, 3 games behind 4th. So anything can happen there, but I don't think it matters. I really don't think it matters. Like if they're 8 cents, because if they're there at 7th and it's the Rockets, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they're 8th and they're against the Thunder. It doesn't matter. I think that Kawhi Leonard is still that good.
Don't say it
Oh,
doesn't
okay.
matter
Yes.
against the
Yeah. Yeah.
Thunder.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's not
Yes.
put the
Fair.
Thunder
Fair.
and the
No. No. No.
Rockets in
No.
the
No.
same
No.
bracket.
No. No. I'm not. I guess I'm not putting it in the same. It's the same bracket, but I think there's reason to be so confident in. I think that the veil has been lifted. It's like, okay, Kawhi is starting to be Kawhi again,
Hmm.
and if knock on wood, things are still progressing and he's still able to play these minutes and he has a balanced roster around him. Like they can play anybody, literally anybody, because you have the league's best playmaker. You want to make those arguments. Who's a better creator than James Harden? Tyrese Halliburton, throw that out there. LeBron James, Luka, sure. Like Harden is there. The league's best playmaker among them. You have in isolation when he's healthy, like Kawhi Leonard in a playoff situation, when you just need a bucket, like he is the one. He's the one. Is he not like? There's not a lot of guys you point to that it's like you hand him the ball, you get the hell out of the way, and he creates in the mid range. He takes a guy down low, or he shoots. Like he's probably at his apex, and that's why it's always been a health thing. Always been a health thing. And I think we've gotten away from it because every single year it's like, well, he's not healthy. But now that he's healthy, I think it's worth bringing the subject back up. There's not a lot of guys like him.
No.
Like Tatum, no, I'm picking Kawhi. Jokic, yeah, there's a conversation there. What other one-on-one? I'm taking him over Luka. I'm him and Shea. That's tough.
Mm.
I think I literally still might take Kawhi because Kawhi still has the size and there's much like he could, unless it's a big, he can still post up. He can choose to do whatever he wants against any defender in front of him. And when he's turned that on as of late, and we've seen it, and that's why I think everyone's like, "Whoa, yeah, that's the guy who was gonna be the sneaky MVP after LeBron's done." Kawhi was never gonna be the face of the league, but he was gonna be like the league's best player until he got hurt. That's where I felt like that conversation has not taken place since Kawhi's injury because he's never been consistently healthy. But I think there's this growing buzz that has revitalized our view of this team, at least mine, where it's kind of a reminder like it doesn't matter if they're the 8 seed and they face the 1 seed or the 2 seed as 7th. Like they will have a chance to play anybody because of their versatility and most importantly because of this guy Kawhi Leonard.
Yeah, no, they have the perfect grounding for a successful playoff team, given that they are capable of playing elite defense. Like that's what you need to be. You need to have that, and like that's why teams like the Warriors still stand pat when they're struggling offensively because they can play elite defense. And there's other teams that are in the same sort of mode. It was kind of similar to the Timberwolves we saw last year. When you can play elite defense, that gives you a shot. And then when you have a guy like Kawhi Leonard, who as much as we probably should doubt the fact that he can still be the best player in a playoff series, there's no reason to say it because we haven't actually seen him in a playoff series where he hasn't looked like the best player. Like the last time we saw him in the playoffs, he was putting up great numbers and then he went down against the Suns and they ultimately lost. Like we haven't seen him go into a playoff series healthy and not be the best player in a pretty long time. That's
Facts.
that
Those
that
are
that's just
facts.
that's just the way it is. So that's what it all comes down to. He is the X factor. If Kawhi Leonard is healthy, you still have every belief that he can be the best player in any playoff series.
Yeah. And just to give shine to a couple other guys, I mean, talking about the other guys, Eve Bucks, averaging 1.18 points possession and 63% from the field on pick and roll. And in terms of defense, when he's in the drop, you sandwich him right between Anthony Davis and Evan Mobley. Like he has been sneaky, very good defensively in the drop. Now, can he switch? No, he's still going to get eaten up. He's been better, but guess who can't switch? And no, don't stop me. Let me talk. Ben Simmons, man, it's been 13 games. Don't look at the box score, but the minutes he plays, it's impactful. They they have another guy who can create on the floor and not dynamically create, but he can get a rebound, run the floor, get a rebound, get them set into their offense. Like very like minimal stuff, but important stuff because then it allows their second units with your Norman Powells, your Boston Juniors, and get those guys working off ball. And the defense that he's able to bring to this team, Derrick Jones Jr. in a lot of situations is used as small ball 5. It can work. Ben Simmons is a small ball 5 is the perfect switchable small ball 5. You can play in the drop, you can play in the switch, put him on guards, and you prefer to play him on guards. And that's not something that they've had. It's cool when you have Nicholas Batum out there as a 5. That's a little tricky. Same thing with Derek Jones Jr. But when you have Ben Simmons, like that is the prototypical small ball five defensively that you can have him roaming, you can have him playing in the middle on zone, you can play him switching. He's just a lot more reasonably versatile as a five, as opposed to those two guys who are really more true wings. And that weapon, that tool, that's like a very specific weapon to throw at teams in the playoffs. And the fact that there's buy-in, like he looks bought in, and as he's talked to the media, he just feels more comfortable there. Like it's more of his role. And yes, is it the furthest cry away from what we thought he was going to be? Yeah, sure. But we're done talking about that. We're done. We're done talking about Ben Simmons as the star who should have been, and now we're talking about him as a X factor in a playoff series as a defensive specialist, and a good short role playmaker, a good open court playmaker, a guy who can grab a rebound, who can box out a five, grab a rebound, go up, cross match, and make a good pass on the right play on the first series of an offensive set. Like that's important. And the Clippers and Tyronn Lue is going to use that. Tyronn Lue knows how to get the most out of his players. And maybe I've talked a little too long on Ben Simmons because you're giving me that look, and I'll stop, I promise. But it's little wrinkles like that I think I get excited for the Clippers, because there's hope in not just is Kawhi Leonard healthy, but there's so much more behind him. It's the balance between the type of player that Norman Powell has progressed to be and how that works synergistically with James Harden, works perfectly with Kawhi Leonard, the way that they can all work together, your three lead scorers, and then all the other guys. Like there's a lot of harmony to this roster that I think I really underestimated, I think, at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, and I mean now they instead of having two playoff floppers in Paul George and Westbrook, they've replaced that with one in Ben Simmons. So that's it. That's an interesting little balance that they've changed up. But no, for real. I'll also mention the Derek Jones Jr. of it is going to be interesting too. Like if he can perform to a similar level we saw offensively from him on the run with the Mavericks last year, that's obviously huge
Yeah.
for the Clippers going into the playoffs as well. I think. Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned this last week, I think with a healthy Kawhi Leonard, I think the Clippers are the best bet to go on like a Cinderella run in the playoffs this year, I think.
Yeah. They're set up for it. And yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to be wrong. And it's cool to be wrong. And maybe we'll finally get the battle of LA we've always wanted. Truly, that
Yeah,
would
that'd be
be
awesome. To
that would be
finally
the
get
setup we
that,
never
like
thought.
to finally get it, and think about how long it's been since we got it, so how long we've been waiting, and it's gonna happen after Paul George is gone, after Anthony Davis is gone. That'd be pretty crazy.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. There'd be so many storylines to that. The fact that, I mean, Luka and LeBron, them in and of themselves are going to be walking storylines, but Battle of LA, Kawhi versus Luka again, but also Kawhi versus LeBron. We've not got to see that series. And
Mhm.
then kind of the prototype that Luka has molded in a way to Harden, and their shooting and them facing off with each other. Derek Jones Jr., a former teammate, like that would be an amazing matchup. But coming down the stretch, a better matchup for the Lakers seems to have been the Chicago Bulls. They've seemed to be the
Not for
best
the no,
matchup,
not a better matchup for the Lakers. It's a way worse matchup for the Lakers, but
at least for TV consumers. Man, guide me down this path, Ronan, because you've seen me at my most hopeful as a Bulls fan. You've seen me at my most angry, my most depressed as a Bulls fan. And I think this season you've also seen me as my most apathetic as a Bulls fan. We've probably gone weeks without talking about them because I don't feel like it. And this March has been just a revelation to me. And I found myself again unwillingly turning on a Bulls game and then just being pulled back in. And there's something about this team that has gotten me excited, but then there's just that feeling of me like this isn't worth it. As an objective observer, talk to me about the Bulls, man. Where should I be at with what I've seen, and what do we do with this information? This Josh Giddey phenom, this Kobe White explosion, is Modest actually going to be a star? Like, how do I reasonably approach all this? I don't even know.
You're right to be excited. You should be excited. This is an exciting time. They've had some really fun wins. Like they've put up 140 points on two occasions since the All-Star break, which not many teams be doing. One of them is on the Lakers, obviously incredible. They've beaten the Nuggets, they've beaten the Pacers, Lakers twice. I mean, it's been a lot of fun, yeah. Are they anywhere close to being a playoff team or contender? No, it doesn't. It doesn't appear like that. But they're in the mode they're supposed to be when you're not a competitor. You're meant to be fun, and that's what the Bulls are right now. And they're in a position where you hope they've made some god awful decisions, some god awful trades, and if you can believe that they're done with that, then they have a very good building ground to start out with again here. Like they've obviously got their pick back. They've uh, They've obviously got a guy in Giddey who, again, when we're talking defensively, yeah, sadly he's in the Luka Doncic sort of mold when it comes to defense. But offensively, at his best, he can do it all. He can play make. He can be a really really impressive player on that end. Kobe White is Kobe White. When he's hot, he's hot. Yeah, he's gonna go cold sometimes, but he is a legit scorer and a guy that any team will be lucky to have. Maybe not as a lead guy, but while he's the guy now, while they're waiting for Buzelis to kind of really spark off and maybe another draft pick that they can jump off. It's been great watching him. He's averaging 29 points per game during this stretch in March. There is something to build on, but it's also I'll be honest, they can still screw it by doing something like overpaying Josh Giddey. That's something that they have to be very
Let's
careful with.
okay. Let's address this piece by piece here because there's a lot, and then the main things are Giddey and Kobe, and my main confusion is Giddey. First question: yes or no? The Bulls won the Caruso Giddey trade.
Okay, I'll, I'll say it's a tie.
All right, at least we're even. That's a far cry below the you didn't get 7 picks for Caruso. Who and anyone and let me come to Caruso's defense here, and I bring this up because a lot of people are posting Caruso's box scores and saying,
You're a
"Hey, look at
box
that."
score guy. Come on.
Yeah, shut up, shut up. But what like you know better than that. Anyone who's paying enough attention knows better than that. But I think I'm at least happy with that value because I think with what I've seen from him and to contextualize for both these guys, ever since we traded Levine and really focused on this new group, Giddey's averaged 29, 7.7. that's that's insane. And I hate to bring up the shooting numbers because I don't believe them. I don't believe that he's a plus he's an over 40% 3-point shooter. I don't believe it. But it's there. So if you want to throw it in there, that's pretty damn cool too. But 29, 7.7, that's that's Luka numbers. That's LeBron numbers. Like no one else is rebounding, playmaking, and scoring at that rate. That's a cornerstone statistically, but I can't convince myself. And that's my problem. And it's a really big problem because it's happening so quickly right before you need to pay him. And is this real offensively? Can this really hold up? And that 8-point performance he just put out in his last game already has people like, ooh, is he coming back down to earth? They're just waiting. I think everyone's waiting for it to come back down. Where's the other shoe? To drop in eventually. But it depends what you ask. How much are you going to pay him? A max? No. But how much is too much? Is a really good question. And who else is willing to pay a guy who just showed out and can say, hey, if you need an offensive engine and you need a guy, if you have a team that you want to run and gun, a lot of teams want to play fast. If you need a guy who's going to help you on the boards, you need a guy who's going to organize your offense. And hey, look, I can actually catch and shoot threes now. I'm not such a liability. I think there's a lot of teams who can convince themselves that.
I'm looking at Jalen Green's contract, and I'm thinking
Mm,
that'd be a fair deal for them to commit to. Decent payout, but not completely hamstringing themselves.
that's a really good one. So that's like that amounts to what, like 30 a year?
Yeah, I think it was about
decreasing.
3 year, 106 million, I think overall.
Yes,
But yeah.
and by the time, but the interesting timing of that particular contract is that it's timed for the next TV deal. So when he could potentially re-sign, it would be when the cap would go up. So it would be a shorter deal. It would be like a two. Jalen Green's is a 2-1.
Mhm.
Josh Giddey doing a 1-1 would be somewhat unheard of for the kind of season he's ending up having right now. That would be quite interesting, and it would really depend on the market. It would depend on how many teams would want to invest in him. Um, that is interesting, but so I think that the answer that I have is if he's too expensive, I think you still need to rebuild. It's been fun. This has been cool, but you can't hamstring yourself. And it's just the defensive side, I think. What is the potential of a guy who's doing this that can't defend anything on the other end? Because he's
Yeah.
not shown flashes of that. He's shown
Mhm.
flashes of the spot up shooting. And that I'm like, okay, if he can spot up shoot and he can do, I believe in the him getting downhill. I believe in him playmaking. Um, I believe that he's probably as good as he's going to be as a finisher inside, which is decent, but not great, not even that good, especially in a playoff setting. I still can't see that being like a third, a quarter, even 20% of your salary cap. I think he's strictly like the fourth best player on a very good team, and I can't imagine looking at that long term. And maybe a lot of teams have seen that. I don't know. It depends on what the bidding war is going to be.
I mean, it might be the best thing possible for the Bulls to get into the playoffs and really see what Josh Giddey's made of. That might be the best thing possible for the Bulls.
Oh, you're pulling me out of my Kobe. Well, let's talk negative and positive on Kobe because that's the biggest part of this whole conundrum for any team that's in the Bulls position. You get in March. March is a weird time. February is a weird time. Post All Star break is a weird time. Who's resting? Who's not? Who's tanking? Who's not? And a lot of that mess leads to some variance. Um, Bulls fans are very well aware of it. I bring it up all the time. Your Kobe White February, your Market in February, your Chris Dunn February. Like there's a lot of that. I think Chris Dunn is, or Kobe White rather, has proved himself that he's a legit scorer in this league. But we can't fool ourselves to think that this is the team. We need a draft pick, and this is such like the short term gains that the euphoria we're getting from these wins is great, especially in such an apathetic season. Like from an emotional standpoint as a fan, like I totally get it. From an emotional standpoint of a team, I can imagine you can amplify that by a million. That in a season where it's been like, hey, nobody cares if we win, they're blowing us up. Maybe everyone will be gone by the end of the season. Let's go win some game. That must feel amazing. But for a team that doesn't have their guy yet, for a team that, look around you, like everyone's gearing up for this draft. And again, we still don't know how to bottom out when it matters. And dude, look at the Magic. I mean, the Magic are set up. Like the Magic tanked for what, 2 years? Not even 2 years straight. They got their guys. Like that's all it takes. Is just being smart for one season, and you see that slipping away. You see that slipping away. You're watching March Madness. You're watching Cooper Flag. You're watching Ace Bailey. You're watching Dylan Harper. That's going away. That's not worth me looking at Josh Giddey getting pooped on in the playoffs, Ronan. That's just not. I can't. There's no way. And I think I know what he is to an extent where I I think he would have to have the most outrageous playoff series for any reasonable basketball fan to watch it and be like, oh, that's different because it's the defensive end. It's the shooting when it matters. Everyone believes that he's probably a top five live ball passer. Like he's one of the most gifted passers in this league. But when it comes to a playoff setting, when you shrink the floor and you can't run up and down and you get targeted and you get left alone in the corners, those are situations that I think he still has not proven yet. And I'm not willing to sacrifice the future for a glimpse at him doing that again.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I more meant it as a reason for them to realize that they can't pay him too much. That was kind of my hinting at why they should get into the playoffs. That was kind of my thinking there. But what do you think about your rookie? What do you think about Buzelis? There's
Is that
people around the
mm.
league that seem to think this guy could turn into a dude in the NBA.
So I think it's very reasonable. Let's start with the floor. What's the floor of a 6'10" rangy wing who is very, very willing and competitive, play defense on ball, and has great off ball instincts and wants to swat and get blocks and has really good feet, very quickly can turn his hips. So he's switchy, he's a good help defender, he's got great instincts to rotate, he's got the length to be a rim protector. So his floor is already been shown this season that he's a really good borderline, could be a great defender. That's like the real foundation for who this player can be. And then I think the shooting really has the flashes of the shooting has been what people are like, wait, where are we going with this? Because the shot was so bad in the G League that everyone wrote him off. He went from being like, hey, maybe there's a top 5 pick to like, end of the lottery, maybe forget about him. Some people were even like, maybe he'll fall out of the lottery because of his shooting. But the shot has looked good, and the shot has gotten better. And you've had flashes of him, and he's streaky. A lot of young shooters are streaky, but it's a consistent shot. He's got a quicker release. He's got a high release. So I think just in terms of mechanics, as a off-ball shooter, that potential is huge. But then I think this is where people get really, really, really excited. You see what he can do off the dribble at 6'10" with his length, with his footwork, and he's got great acceleration off the floor. He can really get up fast. That is where it gets interesting. Can Modest Buzelis be an on-ball creator, not just this defensive guy on the other floor, defensive multi-tool, and then be like an off-ball shooter, cutter? That's a great player. That's cool. That's going to be a valuable player on any competitive team. But the guy who can be an all-star is the guy who does that plus can take you off the dribble and attack a switch. You know, if you go under that screen and what Modest could do there, like that's where I get really interested because he's shown a lot of flashes of that, not just attacking closeouts, but you give him the ball and he's making a quick decision and he's getting down to the middle of the floor and getting to a move. Like those plays are what makes me think that he could have a level of consistency and versatility to his game to be a 20-point per game scorer on high efficiency while being a borderline all NBA defender. Like that's an all-star. A lot of things have to break right, obviously, if that's happened, but I think his base is a lot more advanced than people give him credit for.
Yeah, yeah, no, and I think that's fair, and like I think that's something that people want to see. Like everyone remembers the Bulls, everyone knows the Bulls. Bulls were put in the map by Michael Jordan. We all know that, and then they kind of got back there with the Thibodeau era, and like it feels like the Bulls are a team that I think it's fun when they're good, and I think people want to see them get back there. So you hope that Kobe White, maybe not a superstar in this league, but a legit scorer in this league for sure. Josh Giddey. Maybe not a guy you want to give 150 million to, but a guy that can be a very ample piece of a competitive team. Buzelis potential is there to potentially be a borderline all-star. Then where do they land in the lottery this year? Can they get that right pick and can they turn the likes of Vucevic and a few others into the right pieces? Can they start to make good deals now after all the terrible ones that they've made over the last while? There's potential there. You can kind of see the path. There's just no reason to believe that the Bulls are going to do the right things to make this dream become a reality.
They're firm. Here's the kicker. It's them, Miami, and Portland. Our last hope at a decent shot at a top 4 pick is for the Portland Trailblazers, who are not trying to lose anymore. Like they are still trying to win. And Miami Heat, same thing. All 3 of these teams. Chicago just has to make that decision like, hey, this has been fun. This has been great. If we lose 2 games, we increase our odds from 11.7% by almost 10% to 20.3% at a top four pick. That's not nothing. That's not nothing. That is massive because you can be excited about the team and be like, okay, wrap it up. I saw the flashes. Let's get back at this next season. And if we increase our odds and we get another guy that we're like, okay, this could be a guy or the guy, then things change. But if you keep working yourself out, I don't think we go lower than this at 11.7%, but it's just not great odds sitting at 10. It's not great. And do we surpass Phoenix? That would be then that would be the game ender. If we surpass the 12th worst tankathon odds, then we've completed the classic end to a Bulls losing season in at the end of the season, destroying our odds, and then I get to watch again as the lottery balls fall to another team's favor, and some other team gets to figure out their future while we just mire in our mediocrity. And we sign Josh Giddey to a max. That's what I'm afraid of.
Yeah, I mean,
That's what I'm afraid of.
unfortunately, it's tough and it's sad, but we just can't rule that out. But one thing I'll say, without having any skin in the game, without any bias there, I'd much rather see Cooper Flag end up in Chicago than Washington or
Oh my
Utah.
god, I'm sure he would too. I'm sure
Yeah,
he would too. I mean, let's say I mean Cooper Flag in Utah. This is definitely a fun pod for another day. But just like going off of broadly, like Cooper Flag in Utah would be pretty cool. I think that they're still building, and I believe in their program and what they could do in the future more than Washington. But I mean, Washington's shown a couple flashes here and there. Charlotte is one team that I think is they've had enough time where they don't deserve it. New Orleans,
true.
like, come on, you already won the lottery before in Zion. Like, get I don't you already got Dejounte in the offseason. Like, you don't deserve it.
I already got your
Philly,
Duke guy. Come on.
yeah, yeah, Philly, they would not deserve that. They
Nah,
don't
Philly
deserve that.
definitely not. No.
But topic for another day. But I would love to go over that because that is going to be the fun part of the season for teams like the Bulls as we approach the playoffs, where real teams get to think about how the competition is going to go.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's exciting now. You get close, even though want to get excited for the playoffs. You also can't help but think about the draft, especially when we're watching Cooper Flag and Duke just ball out right now. They've got three projected top 10 picks playing in their team right now, and it's great to see them going on a deep run in the in March Madness. I feel like we don't get to see it enough when these top prospects going deep going deep into March Madness, into the NCAA tournament, and it's definitely good to see this year.
Yeah, yeah, three in the top 10.
Mm.
I think the last time they did that was Cam Reddish, RJ Barrett, Zion Williamson. Could happen again.
They could do it again. I mean, Cooper is definitely. At least there's no doubts about Cooper Flag being number one. Watching this guy, and obviously he's already legit, but looking how filled out he already is. Looking at like how built he is. Not like he's a lightweight, too skinny or anything like that. Like he is so built already at 18 years old. This dude is going to be scary in the NBA.
Yeah, yeah, we'll talk about it. I'm curious to see. He's had his moments of dominance, just pure dominance, and then some other moments where there's definitely some offensive polishing to go. But um, impressive 30 points the other night, and the shot pops when he's shooting. It's like, okay, that's just not fair because when he uses his body, there's still a level of polish that he's working on in his finishing around the rim that he can't just like get over these guys in the NBA. It's going to be a little bit of a different game. But man, if that shooting comes along, the way he had a couple moves where he just kind of like pulled like a sidestep Tatum 3-pointer on the wing. You're like, whoa. Then he has a pull up three, there's a turnaround midi, and flashes of shot making like that make him go from being just a flat out like all-star level player to that's a top 10 player. And we'll get into that more, but the man that's what I'm saying. To be on the outside looking into a sweepstakes for a player like that is not worth watching Josh Giddey get played off the floor in the first round of the play.
Yeah, bro. I think you're right on that. Like my team also gearing up for another playoff run. We need Jalen Brunson back though.
Oh yeah.
Decent update yesterday that he's hoping to get back before the end of the playoffs, getting cleared for basketball activities. That's all good to hear. I want to see him play two or three more games. Obviously, he needs to play four to be eligible for All NBA and Clutch Player of the Year. That's not that important. He's already locked into his contract, so I don't think that's too much on his mind. But I would love to see him be able to play at least like two games for the end of the season, so that he's really ramped up and he's good to go when we get to the playoffs. Because yes, we'll likely be taking on Milwaukee. Could also be Detroit, but we need him at his best to have any hopes of the playoffs, and I'd rather him not be his first game back, not be the first game of the playoffs, which will be around I think April 19th, April 20th.
Yes, and quickly get well soon, Damian Lillard. Um,
Hmm.
hopefully, this is a very limited issue, and he can get back on the floor and obviously get his health sorted out. But scary stuff there. You never
Yeah.
thought you'd be saying, "I hope we face the Bucks instead of the Pistons," but I think that's the situation you're in. Pistons eerily feel like a Cleveland Cavs feisty, prove it kind of team that you don't want to face in the first round, where they're just beating the crap out of you and fighting for every last possession. Because that team, that if whoever the Pistons face, I've been saying it for the past few months now, they are going to give someone hell in the first round, and they're going to be just battered by the time that they have to face the second round. So we'll see who it ends up being, whether it's you guys or the Pacers. But excited to see that happen.
Yeah, and I mean, as a Knicks fan, I guess expecting almost to get through the first round, I would like to see them batter the Pacers and have the Pacers be a bit weakened this year, because I still think the Pacers are the team that's most likely to cause upsets like they did in the Eastern Conference playoffs last year.
Yeah. Well, we're very excited to finally get into like the real matchups and the chess matches that will be coming up as we're finalizing what the Eastern Western Conference is going to look like. Eastern Conference down to really the middling teams and the play-in, but pretty much all set. But the Western Conference, it's going to change by the hour and by the day, and we'll get back to it soon.
Yeah, we still got some big matches even tonight. We're recording this on Monday. The Rockets play the Lakers tonight. The Grizzlies play the Warriors tomorrow, and then I think the Grizzlies and Timberwolves also play this week as well. So there's going to be so much chopping and changing within the standings of the Western Conference. It's a wild, wild west. It never ends. But as it changes, we'll be here to cover it for you. But that's going to do it for today's episode. Thanks for sticking with us, Chris. Thank you so much for joining me. Remember, we're everywhere on social media at Coast to Coast NBA. And most importantly, remember to take every shot and love every moment.
Peace out.